Yeah, thanks for the invitation, thanks for the conference. When I work at university or art school or wherever, and when I introduce students to history and theory of photography, I often start with showing them the selection of images such as this one, for instance. And what I ask them to do is to vote after each and every picture whether the image they saw in reproduction actually was a photograph or whether it was not. And as you can imagine, that you are sure that you can imagine the results of it. There's mostly a very unanimous vote on these three pictures that they are photographs, and there is also a very unanimous vote that these two pictures are not photographs. Now, the fun of the whole thing is that each of the 5 pictures technically is a photograph. In the sense that in the course of their production, photographic processes were employed. The image on the left-hand side, you see, is a zincotype, which is that a black and white drawing was photographed first and then transferred to and etched into a sheet of zinc, which could be printed. The image on the right-hand side is the so-called photosolography, photo woodcut. For which a block of wood was coated with an emulsion, and then the etcher, not the etcher, the engraver sort of engraved through the image. And he or she, mainly he, was translating thus the gray hues of the photographic image which was coating the wood block into fine lines of gray, which make it appear as being gray. In short, those 2 images may not look like photographs as we are used to, but at the same time they apply photographic processes and properties such as cameras or substances or surfaces sensitive to light. But while these pictures, as I said, do not look like photographs, we immediately, instantly identify the other pictures as photographs, and I wonder why and how, by the way. Or rather, I wonder why we do not recognize them as photographs, but look at them as photographs are mostly looked at, and that is as a kind of truthful representations of, say, objects of the real world or whatever. And why is that? When photography was introduced in the 1830s, you see here the Daguerre still life from 1833. When photography was introduced, the critics who saw the photographs, the first pictures, they marveled at the verisimilitude of them. That is, they marveled at that the pictures seemed to be or appeared to them as being true to life, as being faithful, or as looking like what they depict. And in the following decades, photography was understood or was theorized about like being trace of the real objects, or being their imprint, or most prominently, as you will know, being an index of the object, as Thompson's Pierce formulated. Let me quote it briefly with a famous quote. He says, quote, "Photographs, especially instantaneous photographs, are very instructive because we know that they are in certain respects exactly like the objects they represent. But this resemblance is due to the photographs having been produced under such circumstances that they were physically forced to correspond point by point to nature." End quote. And summarizing the different notions from the vocabulary in the Persian vocabulary, means photographic pictures resemble what they do depict. So next question is, what is resemblance? actually, image theory or picture theory doesn't really like resemblance too much as a concept. Because the relation between the picture and the depicted usually is thought of being asymmetrical. In the sense that the picture is less than the physical object, that it does not have the concrete, the palpable properties. And it becomes even more puzzling, but that's just a footnote, it becomes even more puzzling when we're talking about pictures of pictures, that is, reproductions in particular of works of art, and then we come to the notion of that they lack the aura and whatever. But going back to photography and not leaving again reproduction, with photograph there is a different problem, as according to Peirce there is photographic indexicality as a physical connection between the photograph and the real object, making their semblance rather a symmetrical one, not an asymmetrical one as picture theory usually sees it, but rather a symmetrical one. And the interesting thing is that indexicality has long been dismissed, more or less, from theory of photography. But the interesting thing is, and for good reasons, for a number of very, very good reasons, but still, I would say, indexicality is the main concept how we look at photography, how we understand it. That is, photographic images are thought, photographic pictures are understood or treated like as if they were the same or at least a replacement of what they depict. For instance, when I arrived at the airport, the customs officer compared the photograph in my passport with my face, and if he had not seen a strong semblance, I would not be sitting in front of you here. So he might not agree with him. And the similar thing happens when people look through an album. Here the grandfathers explain to their grandsons who was who, that is, they put semblance into some kind of past time. This was real, or this was reality. This is more or less what Roland Barthes, more or less Roland Barthes' notion of society, this has been. Or if we take a last picture, in the reality effect of photography, in the widest sense, maybe most convincing with pornography, in the sense that rationally we might find such an image even disgusting or degrading, while our unconscious or our limbic system is of a very different opinion and makes the body react as if it was confronted with a bodily reality. And I must apologize at that point for showing the female body. Last night I tried to find an appropriate gay porn image, but for reasons unclear to me, the internet connection broke. Don't ask me why. With other words, we, or our body, does not recognize these pictures as photographic pictures, that is, as objects of their own right. It does not recognize the materiality of the picture, and we do not even recognize them as pictures at all, but we recognize them as the objects they depict. Or again, with other words, our practice with photographic pictures is that we apparently recognize these pictures as photographs, while at the same time we forget, or if I may use a neologism, we disrecognize that we look at photographs, and that we look at pictures at all. And the interesting thing is that this forgetting or this recognizing of the photograph as a picture does not even depend on the quality of the picture. This image, for instance, was apparently photographed from the screen. It is blurry, it has stripes, and yet it has a strange kind of transparency which is specific to photographs. Or if you look at a picture like this one, which is blurred and which is out of focus and which has a lot of, say, technical problems that are reproduced in here, it is still recognizable, maybe not by everybody, but those who know. what this points at is that looking at photographs or recognizing photographs or looking through photographs or disrecognizing photographs and taking them for the real thing has to do something with a certain kind of, if you like, fetishization, that we sort of imbue the photographs with some meaning they do not naturally have by themselves. So photographs can always be around something like a keepsake, for instance. And the interesting thing that we have this kind of perception of photograph, and the image at the end does not even have to be a photograph. Because what you see here is not an image which was apparently taken with a camera, but according to the source where I got that image from, it's a rendering. That is, a graphic designer sat at his or her screen and was just modeling the image. Yet we still look at it as if it was the same kind of photographic images we know. And we recognize these, or we treat, maybe it's a better word, we treat these images as photographs, as they seem to promise that they are what they show, or that they, rather, that what they show is real. And just a footnote once more, the interesting thing about, in particular, pictures of that kind, which is stock photography, which is photography, I mean, photography which is just used for illustrating things without meaning anything, like that these photographs, the stock photographs, which you always also find in commodity photography and in fashion photography, and also, by the way, in political photography or news photography, that these pictures seem to erode the Roland Barthes "ça-a-été," that is, this has been. The impression those photographs give is that they are not of a past necessarily, but rather of a present or of a presence or even of a future. It is rather like, this is how it will be if I go to the Caribbean. So it is rather a promise which you find there. That is, photographic pictures do promise something, or rather, pictures we look at as photographic pictures do promise something. Or once more, with other words, there is no such thing as a technical or as a material definition of photographic pictures, at least not one that I know that does not have a leak here or there. What makes pictures into photographic pictures is rather a certain practice that looks for and finds the promise of reality in an image, no matter how it was produced. And this looking and finding is rather cultural, I would say, than ontological, say. And the question is, how did this culture of looking at photographs by looking through them and taking them as reality, how did this culture emerge? Let me go back once more with to history of photography. When, as we see, photography was introduced in the late 1830s, these same people who were looking at the photographs and were so amazed by them, they tried to describe what they were seeing when they first encountered those pictures. And they had difficulties. They had difficulties to describe what they were seeing because these images sort of, in certain respects, were different to all the pictures they knew. And so, what they did when they started to describe what they were seeing was that they compared them to exactly the images they knew. And so they write of those images to be sort of paintings or sort of drawings or sort of engravings. That is, they speak of a certain semblance these pictures have to the other pictures, and at the same time they try to understand where these pictures and why these pictures are different to the pictures they know or they knew. This insecurity or this lack of vocabulary as well very, very quickly fades away. Photographic pictures become pictures of their own right, very soon. The German photography, if I'm not mistaken, was already coined in 1839. Around the whole nomenclature of photographic photography, there's been a huge debate, or not debate, but quite a bit of research in the past years, in particular on passion. Only with desire is very, very instructive. In particular, why it is of importance that there was such a difference, or they had so many very interesting difficulties with finding a proper name, and why in the end photography was the term that made it. And I think, or my hypothesis, why there were those difficulties is, or why we, what photography did introduce was not only new images, but it also introduced new practices that were only possible with those photographic pictures. And interestingly enough, these practices developed mainly through portrait photography, which quickly became, and till today is, I would say, the economically most important and at least numerically most productive branch of photography in the 19th century until today. I don't know, but I know many people who are constantly taking selfies, and we did that yesterday as well. Unfortunately, we couldn't download the selfie we shot at the Red Square yesterday. Show it to you. Anyway, you have to take the stereotype for the time being. So portrait photography, works in a certain way. It is so important for photography, or has such a huge impact on reading photographic images, is that it was, and still is in my eyes at least, the most important tool for what I call bourgeois subjectivation, that is becoming a self-contained subject. Photographic portraits were and are a tool to defend the subject or the individual against its dissipation or against its dislocation and all the other impositions of modernity and postmodernity by way of producing and reproducing semblance. Something we know at the same time to be impossible, that is the defense against the impositions of modernity, and yet these portraits try to achieve it. But they can only do so by promising that they are real, or by promising reality and becoming phantasmagorical at the very, very same time. Which is blatant, which is obvious in these pictures, because the people, or most of the people in those photographs, appear in completely surreal situations, and this completely surreal looks like the woman who's standing in front of a mine made from papier-mâché, and or the guy below who's standing in front of columns and in front of a paint backdrop, and so on. So it is not about, those photographs are not about reality, they are rather about reality slash phantasmagorical images, phantasmagorality, whatever. And at the same time, what these images did allow was that you could look at them, that you could show them to somebody else, and that they would say, "Oh, this is you." So those photographs demand a practice that constantly compares the image, the photographic portrait, the photographic picture, with the appearance of the person, and says, "This is you." And so that is more or less, that it is a practice of constant cross-checking, that is of checking whether some reality resembles a certain photographic picture, or that the cross-checking of whether some reality resembles a certain photographic picture, that this is at the core of our our practices with photography, and it succeeds where other media fail. For instance, if you go downstairs to the cafeteria, you will hardly get the impression that you are in a hut on a sunny beach and you could make a trip with a boat. But looking at the photograph I show you now and telling you that it is at the cafeteria downstairs, you would go down there and you would find the mural painting and you will recognize it among the other pictures. So let me summarize and conclude. First point would be that recognizing a photographic picture has little or nothing to do with its specific materiality or a certain mode of production or whatever. We can recognize pictures as photographs that were not taken with a camera or that were not taken with the help of whatever emulsion or sources sensitive to light, and there are pictures we do not even recognize as photographic, though they were produced with the help of the camera or with the help of light sensitive substances, such as the photo wood engraving or the zinc tile. Second point might be there should be indexicality might be dead as that can be as a theoretical concept. I do not know of any serious theoretician who would still claim that the photographic image is sort of physically connected to what it depicts. Yet, for the practice of looking at and recognizing pictures, treating pictures as photographs, it is of paramount importance. Yet, and that's the strange thing, yet photography is not about authenticity. Photography is about phantasmagories. Sorry, it is to understand, and those phantasmagories are important that we understand, that we grasp modern reality. But to do that, we need the illusion, and that does not mean that we need to lie or to manipulate ourselves. It just we need both. We need some kind of, say, illusion of reality. The third is that we can see that also in that the photographic pictures can be distorted and blurred and can have the wrong colors. For instance, we still recognize the negative as a photograph. Though with some difficulty sometimes. Yet the line that divides the photographic image, the photographic picture and the non-photographic picture is not clear-cut. It is rather a blurred line as well. It is in part, I think, where Oksana's lecture about the multi-layeredness of the photograph was the same point which I'm trying to make here. So you were first. I give you priority. Yet, that's also something Oksana already mentioned. The interesting thing is that if I say that photographic pictures do not, or recognizing photographic pictures does not depend on the materiality, I still would very, very strongly argue that dealing with photography depends on going with materiality and investigating materiality. What we saw with the photographs of Sally Mann, for instance, was, or as Oksana has said, materiality is not neutral. What Sally Mann does not do, for instance, is that she does not retouch her pictures in the way the 19th century photographers did, but that what she does is she delivers herself to the accidents of the material, to the accidents of the chemistry, and so on. And were those images of Sally Mann clear and bright as those of, say, Matthew Brady, they wouldn't be half as interesting as they are through all those blurs and bubbles which are in place. The fourth point would be recognizing, perceiving a picture as a photographic picture, thus has rather to do with our practice with pictures, a practice that we rehearse and repeat when we talk about photography. And this practice is learned, and I think it is mainly learned with portrait photography, because it is one, among others. It's one of the first photographic practices we are encountered with, at least I've been photographing as a kid. I think later showed me image like, oh, this is you. And so there's, if you like, it's a completely different indexicality to the one Peirce mentioned. You're getting indexed. The indexicality is rather the indexicality of the index finger pointing at you and pointing at the photograph. And finally, when we talk about photography, that means that when we talk about photography, we mainly do talk about photographic pictures. But by doing so, as I said, we repeat and rehearse this practice that allows us to make photographic pictures understand as reality. Thus, in talking about photography, it may be worth, at least that's my opinion, to take into consideration not so much or not only the pictures, but rather the practices that makes us desire these pictures as being real or being reality. Thanks for your attention.
I just want to say thank you so much for really fascinating talk, and it's really great to see that there's already connections established with Oksana's paper this morning. So hopefully this will continue throughout the session. So I think we'll move on to the next speaker, and then we'll have questions at the end. Я вас приглашаю, я уверена, что у вас много вопросов к Фридриху. Я приглашаю вас их записать, запомнить, и в конце сессии у нас будет время для вопросов для всех спикеров.